I always hated going into the garage at night. Something about the way the dim, flickering light barely illuminated the corners sent a chill down my spine. The air was always stale, carrying the faint scent of oil and rust. I told myself it was just an old garage, nothing more, but every time I stepped inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. It all started a few weeks ago when I noticed things weren't where I had left them. My toolbox was on the opposite side of the garage. A chair I never used was pulled out, angled toward the door as if someone had been sitting there, waiting. At first, I blamed my own forgetfulness, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Then the noises began. Late at night, I would hear faint shuffling sounds coming from the garage. It wasn't the usual creaks of the house settling or the wind rattling the doors, it was something deliberate. Slow, purposeful movements. One night, I mustered up the courage to check it out. I grabbed a flashlight, took a deep breath, and stepped into the cold space. The beam of my flashlight swept across the cluttered room, illuminating workbenches, shelves, and the old car I had been meaning to fix. Nothing seemed out of place, yet the uneasy sensation in my gut only grew stronger. Just as I turned to leave, I heard it. A quiet exhale. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't my breath, I was holding mine. The sound had come from behind me. I spun around, shining my flashlight frantically, but there was nothing there. The garage door was shut. The side door was locked. I was alone. Or at least, I should have been. Sleep didn't come easy after that. I started avoiding the garage entirely, but it didn't stop the feeling of being watched. Shadows seemed darker. The house felt colder. Then, one night, as I lay in bed, I heard something that made my stomach drop. The sound of the garage door creaking open. I shot up, heart pounding. I knew I had locked it. I reached for my phone to call the police, but as I did, a new noise filled the silence. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps making their way through the garage. My pulse thundered in my ears. I forced myself to move, creeping toward my bedroom window that overlooked the driveway. The garage door was still closed. But I could still hear the footsteps, inside. Suddenly, they stopped. The air in my lungs turned to stone as I realized the horrifying truth. They weren't just inside the garage anymore. They were in the house. I barely had time to react before my bedroom door creaked open. The dim light from the hallway barely illuminated the figure standing in the doorway, tall, motionless, its face obscured by darkness. And then, in a voice that was almost a whisper, it spoke. "I was waiting for you." Everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the cold concrete floor of the garage. The morning sun streamed through the small window, casting long shadows across the walls. My head throbbed, my body ached, but I was alone. At least, that's what I told myself. But as I pushed myself up, something caught my eye, a chair, positioned near the garage door. Angled toward me. As if someone had been sitting there. Waiting. Days passed, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled into my bones. I told myself I had dreamed it all, that stress and exhaustion had played tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew better. Then, one evening, my friend Mark came over. He was the type who never believed in anything supernatural, always quick to laugh things off. When I told him about what had been happening, he smirked and clapped me on the back. "Dude, you're just paranoid. Let's check it out together." I didn't want to go back in there, but with Mark beside me, it felt a little less terrifying. We grabbed a couple of beers and made our way into the garage. The light flickered as always, casting long, shifting shadows. Mark sat down in the chair, the same chair that had been moved, and laughed. "See? Just a creepy old garage." Then the temperature dropped. The air turned icy, our breath suddenly visible. The laughter died on Mark's lips. A slow, creaking sound filled the room. We turned to the garage door. It was locked. But someone, was standing just outside, pressing against the metal. Then, a knock. Slow. Deliberate. Mark swallowed hard. "You got neighbors messing with you?" I shook my head. "That door doesn't lead outside. It leads to the basement." The knocking grew louder, insistent. My heart pounded. Mark stood, stepping toward the door. "Dude, I'm opening it." "Don't," I whispered. But it was too late. The door burst open with a force that sent Mark stumbling backward. A rush of freezing air filled the garage. The shadows stretched unnaturally, dark figures shifting within them. Then, from the darkness, something stepped forward. A figure, identical to me. Mark gasped. "What the hell?" The thing grinned, its face a perfect replica of mine but distorted, its mouth too wide, its eyes too black. It spoke, voice jagged like broken glass. "I was waiting for you." Mark bolted for the door, but I was frozen in place. The thing reached for me, its fingers stretching unnaturally long. A scream built in my throat, but before I could let it out, everything went black again. I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Mark. "Dude, where the hell did you go? I ran, but I couldn't find you. I called, but you never answered. I just got home. Call me." I stared at the message, my hands shaking. Then I looked up at my bedroom door. It was open. And the chair from the garage was sitting in the middle of my room. Angled toward my bed. Waiting. The chair sat there, unmoving, but its presence filled the room like a heavy fog. My breathing was shallow, my fingers clutching the sheets so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to believe it was a prank, that Mark had somehow dragged the chair inside as a sick joke, but I knew better. The thing that looked like me had done this. It had brought the chair. It had been in my room. My phone vibrated again. Another text from Mark. "Dude, are you okay? Seriously, what happened back there?" I hesitated before replying, "I don't know. I just woke up in my bed. The chair is here. I don't know how." 3 dots appeared, then stopped. Then appeared again. "I'm coming over." I started to type back, to tell him not to, but something in the room shifted. A creak in the floorboards. My eyes darted to the corner, where the shadows pooled unnaturally, darker than they should be. The air was heavy, charged, as if something unseen was pressing against my skin. Then, the whisper came. "I was waiting for you." It came from behind me. I spun, my heart hammering against my ribs. The chair was empty. The doorway was clear. But the whisper had been real. I wasn't alone. I bolted for the hallway, flipping on every light as I ran. The house was silent, but the silence was wrong, too deep, too complete. I grabbed my keys and ran outside, breathing in the crisp night air like I'd been drowning inside. The garage loomed in the darkness, its presence filling me with dread. I turned away from it, refusing to look at the door. Not tonight. Mark's car screeched to a stop in my driveway minutes later. He climbed out, looking shaken, his face paler than I'd ever seen it. He slammed the door and stormed up to me. "Dude, you're freaking me out. What the hell is going on?" I gestured toward the house. "The chair. It's in my room." I heard it again. Mark cursed under his breath and rubbed his face. "All right. Enough of this. We're getting more people here. You're not staying in this house alone tonight." He pulled out his phone and called 2 of our friends, Jake and Lisa. Jake was a skeptic, always trying to rationalize things, and Lisa had a fascination with the paranormal. They were the perfect mix for a night like this. Within the hour, they arrived. Lisa was practically buzzing with excitement, while Jake rolled his eyes, arms crossed. "I bet you sleepwalked and brought the chair in yourself," he muttered. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Lisa pushed past us into the house, her phone flashlight sweeping across the walls. "Where's the chair?" I led them upstairs. The door to my room was still open, and the chair still sat there, waiting. Lisa sucked in a breath. "Okay, that's creepy as hell." Jake walked up to it, unimpressed. "It's just a chair, guys." He knocked on it, then sat down with a smirk. "Oh, so spooky." Then, the temperature dropped. The air turned biting cold, our breath misting in the dim light. The shadows around the chair seemed to deepen, stretching toward Jake. The smirk vanished from his face as his skin went pale. "Get up," Lisa whispered. Jake tried, but his body jerked violently. His hands clutched the arms of the chair, his knuckles turning white. I can't move." The whisper came again, this time all around us. "I was waiting for you." The lights flickered. The chair rattled. Jake's breath hitched as his body jerked forward unnaturally, as if something was yanking him into the darkness. I lunged forward, grabbing his arm. Mark and Lisa did the same, pulling him with all our strength. The chair scraped against the floor, dragging forward as if something unseen refused to let go. Then, with a sickening pop, Jake flew out of the chair, tumbling to the ground. The chair stopped moving. The room fell silent. But Jake was shaking, his eyes wide in horror. "Jake, what happened?" Mark asked, his voice shaking. Jake's breathing was ragged. He looked up at us, his expression twisted in fear. "I saw it." Lisa swallowed. "Saw what?" Jake's voice was barely above a whisper. "Him. The other you." He was standing in the dark, watching. Smiling. He sucked in a shaky breath. And he wasn't alone. The silence that followed was suffocating. No one spoke. No one moved. And then, the sound of the garage door creaking open. We all turned toward the window. The garage was dark, the door slightly ajar, revealing nothing but blackness within. But we could hear it. The slow, deliberate footsteps. Lisa grabbed my arm. "No. We are not going down there." Mark, however, took a step forward. "If we don't, it's never going to stop." Jake wiped his face, standing up on shaky legs. "Screw it. Let's end this." Against every ounce of survival instinct in my body, I nodded. Together, we moved toward the garage. The night air felt thick, suffocating. The moment we stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind us. The single bulb overhead flickered violently. Our breaths came in short, panicked gasps. Then we saw them. Figures in the shadows. Not just one. Dozens. All standing still. Watching. Their eyes gleamed unnaturally in the dim light, their faces shifting between familiar and monstrous. And at the front, stepping forward, was him. Me. The twisted smile stretched wider. The voice came again, but this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a chorus. "We were waiting for you." The bulb burst, plunging us into darkness. Darkness swallowed us whole. For a moment, nothing existed but the sound of our own ragged breaths. Then, a whisper slithered through the pitch black, curling around us like smoke. "We were waiting for you." Mark fumbled with his phone, the tiny glow of the screen barely piercing the abyss. Lisa clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Jake stood motionless, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Then, the figures moved. The shadows swirled, shifting like ink in water, bodies flickering between solid and ethereal. Their eyes glowed, pale, empty orbs that seemed to drink in the dim light. And at the front stood my double, grinning with a mouth stretched too wide, its teeth too sharp. Then it stepped forward. "You don't belong here anymore," it said, its voice overlapping with my own, distorted and fractured. The garage trembled. The air turned thick and heavy, pressing against my skin. I could feel something ancient, something hungry, coiling around us. Lisa yanked my sleeve. "We have to get out of here. Now." Jake took a step back, but the figures stepped with him, mirroring our every move. The garage door was shut. The basement door stood open, gaping like a mouth. Mark gritted his teeth. "Screw this. We make a run for it." He bolted toward the garage door, slamming into it with his full weight. But the second he touched it, his body seized. He let out a strangled gasp, his eyes rolling back as the shadows surged up his arms, burrowing into his skin. He screamed, a blood-curdling, soul-tearing sound, as his limbs twisted unnaturally, his body jerking like a marionette. Then he turned to us. His face was still his, but his eyes were gone, hollow pits filled with writhing darkness. His mouth stretched into a grin identical to my double's. "We were waiting for you," he whispered. Lisa let out a choked sob. "Mark?" Mark twitched violently, his head jerking at an unnatural angle. His voice came out garbled, layered. "Stay." Then he lunged. Lisa and Jake yanked me back just in time. Mark's fingers raked the air where I had been standing, his nails too long, too sharp. The shadows dragged him backward, swallowing him whole, his body melting into the darkness like ink dissolving in water. "Run!" I screamed. We bolted. The only way out was the basement. The second we crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind us. The stairs stretched downward, far longer than they should have been. The air reeked of damp earth and rot, the walls pulsing as if alive. Lisa clutched my wrist. This isn't your basement." She was right. The steps seemed endless, spiraling deeper into a darkness that felt alive, shifting, breathing. Shadows pooled along the walls, whispering things I couldn't understand. I glanced behind us. The door was gone. Then, up ahead, a light flickered. Dim, faint. A single, flickering bulb hanging over a wooden table. And sitting in the center of the room, perfectly placed, was the chair. Lisa stopped, her breath coming in short gasps. "No. No, we are not doing this again." Jake's voice was tight. "We don't have a choice." The whispers grew louder. The shadows stretched. Something unseen slithered across the floor, its movement slow, deliberate. Then, the voice came again, but this time, it wasn't just one. It was a chorus. "Sit." I backed away. "No. Sit," they repeated, their voices a broken, jagged symphony. Jake shook his head. "We don't listen to them. We keep moving." But Lisa's face had gone pale, her gaze locked on something behind us. I turned. Mark stood there, or what was left of him. His body twitched in unnatural spasms, his skin stretched too tight over his bones. And behind him, dozens of others lurked, half-formed copies of us, their faces shifting between familiar and monstrous. Mark's mouth moved, but the voice that came out was layered with all of theirs, overlapping, echoing. "One of you stays." The air turned suffocating. The shadows closed in. Jake let out a sharp breath. "They want a replacement." I took a step back. "No. We're all getting out of here." The figures surged forward. We scattered. Lisa screamed as shadowed hands clawed at her. Jake grabbed her, pulling her free, but the creatures moved faster. Mark lunged at me, his two long fingers curling around my throat. His touch burned like ice, the darkness burrowing into my skin. My vision blurred. My head swam. The world tilted. And then, I saw it. The thing wearing my face. It stood in front of the chair, watching, waiting. Its grin widened. You were supposed to stay. Rage flared in my chest. I am not you. I fought against the weight of Mark's grip, reaching out blindly. My fingers brushed against something cold and solid, a rusted wrench, half buried in the dirt. Without thinking, I swung. The metal connected with Mark's skull with a sickening crack. The shadows recoiled. He let out an inhuman screech, his body collapsing in on itself like smoke dissipating in the wind. The darkness writhed violently, screaming in a chorus of stolen voices. The shadows flickered, faces contorting, stretching, dissolving. The chair rattled. The bulb overhead pulsed violently. Then, everything exploded in light. A deafening roar swallowed the world. My body was yanked backward, weightless, spinning, falling. Then nothing. I woke up gasping. The cold, hard floor of my bedroom pressed against my back. Morning light streamed through the window. Lisa and Jake lay beside me, unconscious but breathing. The house was silent. The chair was gone. Lisa stirred first, sitting up with a sharp inhale. Are we back? Jake groaned, rubbing his temples. I don't know. I forced myself to my feet, my body aching. Every instinct screamed at me to check the garage, to make sure it was really over. But I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my keys. We're leaving. Lisa didn't argue. Neither did Jake. As we piled into my car, I glanced at the house one last time. The windows were dark. The garage door was shut. But as I put the car in reverse, something shifted in the reflection of my rearview mirror. A figure standing in the garage doorway. Watching. Smiling. Whispering one last time. We will be waiting.